Does that mean we should get started?
I'm waiting for a notice to start. They can see us. Okay, let's get started.
All right, great. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, You Had a Matchmaker, Now What? I'm Liz Whitehead. I'm the CEO of 12.5, and I'm here with Cass Bailey from Slice Communications. And we had the idea for this webinar. We were talking about some of the things that our clients are experiencing and the pain points they had. So we developed this as a way to address the pain points you might be feeling as a certified women business owner who has had a matchmaker. You've had some good connections with corporate members, and you're really looking for ways to take that relationship, to take the business to the next level, to take that business transaction to the next level. So we came up with this, and we want to just thank you so much for coming. We want you to be able to ask questions. There is a Q&A portion of it, so you can ask questions, and we will also leave some time for questions at the end so you can interact with us and we can clarify anything that wasn't clear at the beginning. So I'm going to get started. Cass is going to do the next part, and actually as I go through my presentation, you'll actually see that there's a bunch of parts where I'm going to tell you that Cass is going to tell you a little more about this later on. But let's get started, and again, any questions, please feel free to ask us as we go. So who am I? So you had a matchmaker, now what? Basically, the idea is that you have started some relationships with corporate members of the WeBank, that are affiliated with WeBank, and you're wondering, all right, what's the best next step? I feel like I had a great conversation. We had a really good one-on-one meeting. What am I doing? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing right? What should I do next? So that's what I'm going to get into. So what? So why should you listen to me? I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I have been involved with WeBank since 2002, so about 16, 17 years now. I was the head of the WPEO in New York, the regional certification director there, and then I headed up the DC regional affiliate. After that, I went to WeConnect International, which is the international organization that certifies women-owned businesses. And then I started my own company to pick up where those organizations kind of leave off because they can't give one-on-one help to the thousands and thousands of WBEs out there. And so at my first conference, which as a business owner myself, I actually had 10 matchmaker meetings. My clients averaged 3 matchmaker meetings, and I am doing work with the corporate client. So that's just a little bit about my background, just to tell you, I want to share with you some of my experience and some of the things that have worked for me. Before we get into the, what do I do next? I know that as business owners, we're busy and we want to get to the next step. But before we do that, I want to set the stage, which might help you think about, 1, what you want to do next. And then 2, some things that you could do differently with different matchmakers to get the result you want. So the first question is, how did you get a matchmaker? Some of you on the call might be thinking, I've been involved with this network for years and I've never even gotten a matchmaker. These are some of the ways that I think that me and my clients have been successful in doing that. 1 is building relationships. There's no shortcut. It takes some time, but you built relationships with the people so that when supplier diversity representatives have an opportunity to meet with you one-on-one, they say, oh, that's right. I remember Liz. I remember Cass, and I wanted to talk to her more about this. This is a good opportunity. I want her to be able to talk to my buyer, so I'm going to bring her in. That's the building relationships piece of it that we're all familiar with. How did you do that? Maybe you met the corporate member at a local event. The matchmakers typically take place, and the ones that I'm talking about now are ones that take place at a WeBank national event. So this is either the Summit and Salute, which takes place in March. In 2019, it's going to be in Houston, March 11th to the 13th. Or they take place at the WeBank National Conference. This year it's going to be, it's always in June. This year it's going to be in Baltimore from June 25th through the 27th. So mark your calendars for those. If you're one of the people on the call that haven't gotten a matchmaker yet, those are 2 opportunities where you can get them. But then also there's matchmakers at some of your regional events. So the people that you actually submitted your WeBank application to when you wanted to get certified, they have events. So for example, I was just at the New York Breakthrough Breakfast, and they had matchmaking. And so you might have had a matchmaker at any one of these events, and you might have met a corporate member at a local event before you went to the national. So they wanted to take that conversation to one of their colleagues and invited you in. Now, this is one that some of you might not be familiar with, but you might have made requests to corporate members once the list was available. A lot of my clients weren't aware that you could do this, that when you register for one of the national events, the Summit and Salute or the national conference, that there's actually a list of corporate members who are participating in those matchmakers. So maybe you ask them, can you meet with me? I have a good solution for you. Can you make, if you have available slots, can you make time available to me? And then you might be like, I don't know, it's just luck. I registered for the conference and I got a matchmaker, or I simply don't know. And all of those answers are fine. I think if you fall into the just luck or I don't know category, there's probably some more things on the top of the list that you can be doing to make sure that you're continuing to get matchmakers, that you're continuing to build those relationships with the people that you want to do business with. And if you have any questions about the I don't know piece, feel free to ask at the end. So once you were at the matchmaker, presumably this was you, right? You had a great meeting. You were high-fiving at the end. You thought it went really well. And these are probably some of the things that you did if it did go well. Maybe you didn't do these things and it still went well, and that's okay. But I think for a lot of people, this is probably how you had a really successful meeting. One, and I know this is a tough one and that they don't always give this information, but you got the names and the information of the people you met with. One of the benefits of the matchmaking meeting is that it doesn't just take place with the supplier diversity person. They often bring in a buyer or a category manager or a procurement person, and that person might not be the person listed in WeBank link as your contact. So you got the names and information for those people so you could follow up directly. They don't all have cards. They don't all give them out. But if you did get that information, that's really good because you know who you're following up with. And even if you didn't get their email address, for example, it's helpful to say, oh, I met with Shelly. I met with your colleague Shelly during the matchmaker, and we discussed these things. So that's the first thing. You probably asked, why me? Why did you want to meet with me? So you could start the conversation off with a solution that you provide for what they're actually looking for. What I find is that in the 10 matchmaker meetings that I had, the corporations would say somewhere between, one, this specific thing in your profile made us want to have a meeting with you, anywhere to, I'm just sort of feeling stuff out. I don't really know. We might have a need for what you provide later on down the road, and I'm just trying to get to know people. But that gives you a sense of some of the other things you might be looking for. The time frame that they're, do they have any urgency around this, and what's the process going forward? Of course, if someone's like, I'm just feeling it out, we might have a need for it later on, then you know that their process isn't super urgent, but it's going to be incumbent on you to keep following up. So when that opportunity becomes available, you're top of mind. And again, we'll get into a little bit about how you do that later. Maybe you gave a brief pitch or demo that differentiated you from your competitors. I think one thing that I did at my matchmaking meetings was I brought a little video of a training that I provide. And it actually, I think most people really liked it because it gave them a break from talking. They were talking, I had 10 matchmaker meetings. They had probably 12 throughout the day. So they were talking constantly. So it was nice to give somebody something to look at. And more importantly than that, it also differentiated me from some of the other people. These are the things I provide. This is the way I deliver the training. It can give you a feel for it. You probably asked about timeframes. What is the time frame for making this decision? Or that became clear to you from some of the other conversation. And then you presented an aha moment. So what I mean by that is there was some point during the conversation where the person you were talking to said, yeah, you know what? That is the problem we're having. Or yes, that is a solution we could, that we could use. I hadn't thought about it that way, but um, that's what I think of as an aha moment, which you got to through the conversation you were having and the preparation and the research that you did in advance of your matchmaker meeting. Again, if that aha moment didn't come up, that's okay. There's going to be ways to present those aha moments going forward. Again, Cass is going to get into a little bit how to do that. But if you had that in the meeting, that's a good sign that, yeah, they really did want to follow up with you. And then you agreed on follow up. So I should email you this information. I should follow up with so-and-so. You had at least something that you were supposed to do to follow up. Resend your capability statement, register in the portal. So that's, again, this is, I think, how a typical matchmaking meeting goes. Really good ones, you spend much more times on the aha moments and getting questions from them or asking questions to them so that you can set yourself up for the follow-up. But that said, you had a good matchmaker and now you're waiting for the next step. You did your follow-up, you did the follow-up that you're supposed to do. What happens next? So what I'm going to get into now is a little bit about the way you want it to happen, the way you think it might happen, and then what actually goes on with the supplier diversity person. So I call this the myth, but it's really just sort of the ideal, what we'd like to happen. I had a great matchmaker meeting and I'm going to send an email that you see your supplier diversity person there in the middle who gets your email. And then over here on the side, they send an email to their colleague. Their colleague follows up with an RFP or an RFI, which goes to you. You're able to send it in, agree on terms, the money comes back to you, and it's a nice, elegant circle. That's what we like to think happens. And I'm not going to say it doesn't always happen like that. In fact, I have some examples of how it does happen pretty seamlessly. But more likely, this is what happens. You send an email. This is the reality. You send an email and it goes into an inbox of 1,000 unread emails or more, and no one's sitting at that desk because that person is flying to go to other conferences, to talk to other WBEs or MBEs or LGBT businesses. They're going to conferences all the time. They might be getting urgent requests from procurement people or their category managers, their business units. Maybe they're speaking at events. They're looking through their portal to try and meet other needs. And so it's really not as seamless and elegant a process as we would sometimes want it to be. So what do you do about that? How do you get to the next steps? So I came up with 3 things to get to the next steps, and that's going to lead into what Cass is going to tell you about, what to do next. But I think the keys are follow instructions, provide value, and don't give up. And how did I come up with those? This is the way that I have seen it work for my clients, and I can use a personal example of a corporate contact I didn't even have a matchmaker meeting with, but I had met at one of the local events, and I talked a little bit about what I did, and she had one of those moments like, oh, that's right. You also do diversity training for corporations as well as helping WBEs. And I said yes, and she followed up with me and asked me to fill out an RFI, so a request for information that I filled out, which I not only filled out, but I reported back to her that I had filled it out. I completed it, and that was helpful for her because then I was on top of her mind, and she could bring me to the next step in the process or follow up with her people on where that was. The next step is providing value. So this can come in a lot of different forms, but I would say with this particular relationship, I had provided value to them in the past. I had built a relationship with them. I had been helpful to them in the past. So when it came time for me to have an interview or talk to the business person about this opportunity, the supplier diversity person was not making the decision, but was able to put in a good word for me. And so that made that interview process and the next steps really, really comfortable. And it was like getting a warm introduction on the next phase. And the next step is don't give up. So this entire process took 3 months from the time of getting the RFI to the time that I, was able to actually sign a contract. And then before I actually got work, it took a little bit longer than that. But the relationship building process that got me to step 2 was much longer. So the reason why they were able to look at, to send this out to me, to remember who I was, and then put in a good word for me was because I took the time developing the relationships, not only in advance of getting to a matchmaker, in advance of getting to this meeting, but just in terms of the whole long process of building that relationship with the supplier diversity people and providing value where you can. So just to recap these parts, follow instructions. So you might have agreed on follow-up. You want to follow the instructions that the people gave you. If they said register in their portal, register in their portal, because you know what? That gives you an excuse to reach back out and say, I did it. I registered in your portal like you asked me to. Respond to their requests. If it's, you might get something a few months later which says respond to this, but you haven't heard back from the initial person that you spoke to. That might be part of their process. Again, it's a good idea to follow up. If you don't plan on responding to it, let them know that too. Let them know we don't have time right now, or it doesn't fit in with these requirements. Just keep them in the loop so they don't feel like they've provided you an opportunity that you're now not following up on. Provide value. Be a resource to them in ways that you can. This might include volunteering on committees. It might include just thanking them for sponsoring an event that you attended. Things like that actually do provide value to them and recognition. And the other thing is, see them not as a gatekeeper. I hear a lot of people, especially going back to that busy slide, where they feel like I just have to get around this gatekeeper to the person that I need to speak to. Well, I heard one supplier diversity person say, I don't like when people don't treat me like a decision maker, because I might not be the one that can decide to do business with you, but I can decide to keep you out. So I think when you see these people as your advocate, right? Like the person that can put in a good word as you go to the next step, the person that can help you maybe negotiate terms from a net 60 to a net 45 in terms of payment. These are the way you want to see the supplier diversity people, and they can feel that from you, and they are more likely to be your advocate when you treat them like an advocate rather than a gatekeeper. And then finally, don't give up. Have an ongoing marketing plan and a reason to get in touch. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cass, who's going to have a lot more information for you on that.
Thanks so much, Liz. So I am going to share some of my best practices and expertise with you guys today, and hopefully you will find it useful. So I'm just going to share my screen now and go into presentation mode. Okay, great. So Liz set me up in a great way. I'm going to talk not just about the what, but also the how. So what I plan to cover today in this next 15 minutes or so is about getting what you want, knowing your audience, making an impression. I'm going to talk about a compelling reason to reconnect, and I'm going to talk about many, many touch points. These are the basics of any good marketing plan, and I'm going to talk today about how you can apply them following a matchmaker to continue marketing your company. So a little bit about us. We are a PR, social media, and email marketing agency located in Philadelphia. We run on Traction and the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. We've been certified as a WBE for the past 4 years now, almost 5, and have had a great opportunity to become part of this community, a community that we value tremendously. We also host Social Media Day here in Philadelphia that has about 500 to 600 people every year. We have speakers from Twitter and LinkedIn, from Pinterest and IBM and Adobe and the Knot and Porsche, and just incredible speakers. And so that happens at the end of June every year. If you happen to be in Philadelphia, we'd love to see you there. We also had the opportunity to produce a white paper and a study with the Wharton School specifically about WBEs and how they market themselves and how corporate buyers buy. I'm not going to get into detail on that today, but if you would like to download it, you can visit our website. The URL is there below, and it'll share with you the research that was done by students at the Wharton School on how the disconnect exists between how women are marketing their businesses and how corporate buyers are trying to buy. Okay, so let's start with getting what you want, because good marketing is always supposed to support your business growth and your business goals. And so this is the secret sauce to getting what you want. This is the strategy, the foundation of any marketing communication strategy. The part at the end there is your measurable action. This is what you want people to do on your behalf, or that you want them to do to help you grow your business. The part at the far end is the target audience. Who are these people? And the middle part is the compelling content. What are you going to say to those people to get them to take the actions that you want? So I'm going to talk through each one of these three parts in the context of a matchmaker and immediately following a matchmaker, because if you can start to think about your interactions this way, hopefully you will get more of what you want, which is growing your business. So let's begin with the actions. So what are the actions? So let's say you've had a matchmaker and that's what you wanted. You wanted somebody to select you for the matchmaker. That's great. What is the next action you want? Sometimes it's an introduction. Sometimes you want to be sent an RFP, or you want to be sent an RFQ or an RFI, kind of like what Liz was talking about, and you want the opportunity to fill that out. Sometimes you want a good word. Like Liz said, our supplier diversity partners can be really great advocates on our behalf, and so we want them to tell other people good things about us. Sometimes we want to help them claim credit. So for instance, if we're already doing work with their company, we want them to say, oh, that was a WBE, and have you become one of their success stories. Sometimes you want them to share information and insight with you about when contracts are coming up, who currently has the contract, if there's an opportunity to be a tier 2 supplier. Sometimes you want to get invited to an event if they have their own supplier event, if they have their own supplier conference just for their buyers at their company. Sometimes you want to get invited to that. What's not going to happen, and I think Liz touched on this, is that you are not going to have somebody at a matchmaker hand you a contract right then and there, and chances are you're not going to get them to give you a contract after that with your first follow-up either. So before you have your matchmaker, or even after you have your matchmaker, think about, and maybe there are other actions as well, think about which one of these actions is the most important for you. Maybe there are 2 actions, and sometimes giving people 2 ways to help you out is the most empowering and the most effective for them. But I want you all to take a second and to write down, okay, I had a matchmaker. Now what do I need? What is the action that I want to create? Because if I create this, it'll help my business grow. So I'm going to pause there for a second. Remember that you guys can feel free to ask questions through this conference at any time. There's a little Q&A button. But we want you to first think about the actions that you want to create, okay? The next thing we need to talk about is knowing your audience. So in this case, we are primarily talking about supplier diversity people, as well as buyers within corporations who you've had the opportunity to meet at your matchmaker. But just knowing those things is not enough. So we need to know more about these people as human beings. These are some of the things that we recommend before the matchmaker. Who is it that works in supplier diversity at this company that might be seated there with you? How many people are you going to be meeting with, if you can find that out? How big is their supplier diversity group? How big is the procurement or the buyer group that you could potentially meet with? Have you met with these people before, or somebody from that company? And if you have met with somebody from that company before, what was the situation that you met them in? What did you discuss? And what can you bring into this future conversation? What does their LinkedIn profile tell you about them? Now, maybe you don't have the exact names of the people that you're going to be meeting with, but can you do a little research into LinkedIn profiles of the people that you might be meeting with so that you can find any common connections? And similarly, what can you learn from their Twitter handle? Now, you might tell me that, supplier diversity people don't have Twitter handles, and that is fundamentally untrue. There are really, really fantastic supplier diversity and corporate buyers that I've met, and they have very active social media presences, especially on Twitter. It is easiest to be able to search hashtag WeBankConf or Summon and Salute, those hashtags on Twitter. You can see the people who have been talking about either or both conferences in the past and see if there's anybody that you might be meeting with there. From there, you can also take a look at everything else that they've put out or they've tweeted. So even though you might not know the exact names of the people that you're going to be meeting with at the matchmaker, do as much research into the humans as you can in advance, because that way you'll be able to best deliver something that's relevant to them. So during the matchmaker, we want you to try to get some of this information, not just talk about yourself, right? This should be a conversation. So ask them, what are they working on? What made them interested in you? What's stressing them out right now? How do they like to get information? Some people like to get emails. Some people don't. Some people like phone calls. They like to set up a time to chat one-on-one. Some people are on LinkedIn all the time. Some people read certain magazines or publications. Some people maybe just like get the WeBank President's Letter, and that's where they get news and information. And when do they like to get it? Are they morning people or evening people? Do they prefer to clear out their inbox on Saturday mornings? Some of us are that way. And is there a way to connect to them person to person? Not just around business, not just about them buying from you, but is there something about them, their interests or their hobbies, that could be a way to create a personal relationship? So as much as possible, and I know we have a very short period of time during matchmaker sessions. I know they go fast, and I know that you want to tell the matchmaker, the supplier diversity, and the buyers everything that you can about yourself, but you're gonna end up actually creating and having a chance to get more value out of that time by creating longer term relationships if you use a little bit of your time in the matchmaker to better understand the people using these sort of questions. Now after, what can we find out about these people afterwards? Well, at that point you have their names, you have their roles and responsibilities. Make sure that you get those things. Don't leave without them. They're really the most important thing that you can get from a matchmaker. You'll have the opportunity to see who else you know in common. What else can you learn from their LinkedIn now? Did you go to the same school? Did you work at the same company? Do you have other people in common? And what else can you learn from their Twitter handle if they have them? You could also take a look at their Facebook page if it is open and available, just to try to understand them a little bit better. And I would recommend also looking at their company LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook profiles, because that'll tell you more about the context that they are operating and working in, what matters to their company, what matters to their executives. So after the fact, what else can you do to learn about them? Once you've had the opportunity to ask all of these questions, I would recommend you actually like building a profile around the people that you've met with and the people that you want to meet with, so that you don't just forget these things, that you have them top of mind, that you have them available, and so that you're using the information that you've collected to better talk with them, not at them. So let's talk a little bit about making an impression. I think Liz talked about this before, but as the marketing person in the room, I also want to go a little deeper on it. So we believe that different is better than better. What that means is that you don't want to spend your time talking with somebody, especially in a matchmaker situation, about why your particular product or service is slightly better than somebody else's. It's most important to communicate clearly what makes you different. For instance, if you were in a store and you saw lots and lots of different apples, and maybe some are green and some are red and some are yellow, you may not understand which one is really the best for you to buy. But if you were in a store and there were a whole bunch of apples and there was one orange and you really needed an orange, it would be very, very easy for you to say, that is what I need and that's what I'm going to engage with. So the way that we recommend that you do this is focus on your unfair advantage. What is it that you have that nobody else has that makes it so that you're going to be the best fit for the company with which you are meeting at the matchmaker? Some examples of unfair advantage might include relationships. You might know people, right? Because we know that relationships are powerful. You might have experiences. You might have past work. You might have access to information or capital or people that nobody else has. But maybe there's something else that is an unfair advantage that you have that makes you different compared to everybody else. So I'm going to ask you, now that you guys hopefully have written down the action that you wanted to create, to start writing down and think about like, what is the unfair advantage, or what is the real differentiator that I have that I want to make sure that I communicate, not just in the matchmaker meeting, but after the matchmaker meeting. Maybe I didn't do a great job communicating my differentiator, so now is a new opportunity to do that. Once you've written it down, another exercise for you to do after this webinar is to write down your top 3 or 4 competitors, especially if they are other WBEs. Check out their website and see about how they talk about themselves. We always communicate in context, and different is obviously a relative term. So until you've double checked that what you're saying and what you're talking about is not what other people are talking about, you don't want to use it, because you want to verify the fact that it's different. We also recommend that people be human, give more that you take, find humor and levity. There's an old saying that people remember how you make them feel. So if you can make them laugh or have a good time, then they're going to remember you as somebody who's different than just everybody else who came in and sat down and said, this is what I do, this is what I do. Okay, some compelling reasons to reconnect. So real quick, what is compelling? Compel is to force or oblige someone to do something. And then compelling is to evoke interest, attention, or admiration. And what we want to do here is evoke interest and attention in order to get them to do something on your behalf, to be your advocate. So what is compelling? I've got 5 options here. 1 is your capability statement. 2, your case studies. 3, a direct ask based on the matchmaker. 4, a long email with your service offerings. And 5, a photo of the 2 of you from the matchmaker. Only one thing on this list is truly compelling, and the answer for those of you who are playing along at home is 3, a direct ask back based on the matchmaker meeting. If you are following up and sending any of these other things following a matchmaker, that is not going to be compelling. They are not going to get people to take the action that you want them to take. They may ask you to send those things, and that's fine. And like Liz said, you can follow up and say, okay, I sent it to you, but you're not going to get the result that you want in terms of your communications. The photo of the 2 of you is nice, and it is always a good thing to follow up with that photo so that they remember you and they remember the experience of meeting with you, but the most compelling is going to be that direct ask. So what continues to be compelling? 1, relevant research you did on their industry. 2, a new insight on their problem or stress. 3, an invitation to a happening or event. 4, third-party media coverage of your business. 5, an offer of a favor or connection. Or 6, a customized video they can send to their contacts. So again, for you guys playing at home, the answer is actually 7, all of the above. Any of these things are something that add value, like Liz was talking about. There's something that people know what to do with. So for instance, if I receive a new insight on my problem or stress, or an invitation to a happening or event, and I'm a supplier diversity person, I know what I can do with those things. I can pass them on, or I can read them, or I could ask questions about them, or I could take a call with you about them, or I could attend that event, or send it to somebody else to my company to attend that event. Because remember, we're looking at our supplier diversity people as our best advocates. Okay, let's talk a little bit about many touch points. So the rule of 7 is a pretty typical marketing rule. This is the rule that says that somebody needs to hear or see something 7 times before they actually understand it and take action on it. I will tell you that that rule is outdated. Now we're really seeing 11, 12, or 13 be the number of times that somebody needs to hear or see something before they take action on it. So sending 1 follow-up email to a supplier diversity person or a buyer isn't going to cut it. That said, nobody wants to get the same thing over and over and over again. That is annoying and not compelling. Go back to the list of compelling things. Excuse me. Before we go on, I did want to share a couple of things with you. The study that I mentioned earlier, the WBE Disconnect, showed that 40% or more of corporate buyers are millennials. That might not be the supplier diversity community, but it is the corporate buyers, the people that they work with and that they interact with, and that hopefully they will be our advocates for. We also know that 53% of corporate B2B buyers say social media plays a role in making a final selection, and we expect that number to go up in the near future as well. So when we took a look at 896 women-owned businesses, we found that 42% of them did not have a company LinkedIn page at all. 50% of them had no Facebook page, 69 no company Twitter handle, and 94 no company Instagram. That one's fine. But if you do one thing and one thing only as a result of this webinar, I want you guys to go back and set up your company LinkedIn page, because that is a great opportunity to stay top of mind with and connected to supplier diversity people. So there are 2 ways to communicate regarding the compelling content, that 11, 12, 13 opportunities. One of them is passive and the other is active. I'm going to start with passive. So passive is showing up where they get news and information, and that's why I asked you to ask that question early on. How do they like to receive it? So when they log on to LinkedIn every day, they check into their Twitter, they look at the WeBank President's Report, those sort of things. You want to be there, and you want to be there regularly. That means connecting with them. That means making sure that you are putting content out there that they can find relevant. So what gets their attention? WeBank related information gets the attention most often. Think about it. They are kind of like attuned to the WeBank community. It's a community where they spend a lot of time and money and effort, and anything that you post related to WeBank will probably get their attention. Your new clients, especially if they're relevant to that particular industry, any new wins that you have, awards, recognition, something that says that other people think that you're great, excuse me, industry info about their industry, anything that they post that you share will get their attention. Anytime you mention them, it gets their attention, and any like retweets or reposts will also get their attention. So in terms of passive communication, being there whenever they like log in, these are some things, and I'm sure you can come up with others that will help with that. So what to say? This is the more active part of it. This is you showing up in their presence on a regular basis. You want to be in their inboxes. You want to be on their voicemail. You also want to be in their presence on an ongoing basis. And so we need to say some things actively that will be compelling and hopefully get us to that action we're intending. We are a traction company, like I said, and with traction, there is a saying that you want to automate the predictable so the personal can be exceptional. And so I'm going to share with you a couple of tools that you can use to automate some of this communication so that when you talk to them, you're using that time well, and that relationship is progressing because you're creating an exceptional experience. This is a tool that we use a lot. It's called Boomerang. Boomerang is something that you can download and use in your Gmail, in your Outlook, or on your mobile phone. Boomerang gives you the ability to send emails to be sent in the future. It also will bring an email that hasn't gotten a reply back to the top of your inbox so that you can follow up with somebody. So I'll give you a little thing. What I like to do is, Liz talked about how supplier diversity people are on planes all the time and traveling. And I know that when I'm at the conference, I usually have a couple minutes to sit and do all of my follow-up, but they don't have a couple minutes to read it. So, excuse me, I will write my emails and I will use Boomerang to make sure they get sent in 5, 6, or 7 days. And that way I'm following up with the supplier diversity people without having to then carve out time in my schedule when I'm back in my business and things are crazy after being gone for a week. Boomerang can be a really useful tool for that. Now, remember, you want to say things that are compelling, that are specific, and that lead to the action that you want to create. We also want to recommend Hootsuite. A lot of you guys are probably aware of it, but it is an automation tool that puts posts out on a scheduled basis on all your different social platforms. Sorry, I'm having a moment. So you want to make sure that you use it. But before you do, stop. Don't just start using Hootsuite because Cass said to use Hootsuite. Take a look at all these different social platforms. YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. All the icons look different because all of the channels are different. You do not want to use Hootsuite to blast the same exact content out to all the different channels because the content and the way that the channels use it, it's different. And if you're seeing the same thing on your Twitter, your LinkedIn, and your Facebook, and it is not written and customized in a way that's meant for that channel, you're gonna look unprofessional, like you don't know what you're doing. And those 40% of millennial B2B buyers are gonna say, this company doesn't really have it together. So if you're gonna use Hootsuite, and we do recommend using it, but using it smartly and wisely, you want to first start with like putting posts on LinkedIn, and then possibly Twitter and Facebook. And you want to make sure that what you're putting out is going to be compelling and relevant to your most important audiences, which in this case are corporate buyers and supplier diversity people. And you want to make sure what you're putting out is relevant to them. Now, finally, this is the advanced version of automation and follow-up. If you are able to, we do recommend using MailChimp and MailChimp automation and their workflows in order to make sure that you're regularly communicating with supplier diversity and buyers, supplier diversity professionals and buyers throughout the year. Now, like I said, this is much more advanced, and if you want to talk to us about it, you certainly can. But this we've seen can be very, very effective when used well and in a way that is personal, that is compelling, and that is targeted at the audience. So what we covered today: getting what you want, knowing the audience, making an impression, compelling reason to reconnect, and many touch points. So I'm going to turn it back to Liz then to wrap us up and to answer any questions that we have.
Yeah, so I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Does anybody have, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them there or in the chat. And so we can answer any questions. I wanted to just say, after, Cass, what you went, all the things that you went through, I think that was a really, really good overview of things that we should be keeping in mind after a matchmaker, but also as we prepare for the next season of interacting with supplier diversity people. I know that a lot of things are wrapping up in the fall, but there's still some events coming up in December, and it's never too early to, one, get ready for the next year and start building those relationships if there are events coming up, but then also continuing to follow up. If you haven't followed up yet, it's not too late. Now is a good time to say, oh, this came to me from my matchmaker meeting. I think there's no time limit on this, but Cass, what would you say about that? Like, when do you stop, I guess?
Yeah, so you don't stop, right? Because when you're trying to create a relationship with somebody, you don't just be like, nah, I'm going to give up on it, right? Like, if it's a valuable relationship, there are two things that I recommend. One is, because a lot of our supplier diversity people also attend NMSDC, make sure that you're aware of and conscious of the fact that they're going to be there. Don't send them emails while they're there or like right after NMSDC, even if you don't go to that conference, because they're not going to have the time to look at it. I would recommend that you send them an email that says at some point, hey, I'd love to just reconnect with you before the end of the year. We've had a great year. I'd love to tell you about it. I'd also love to hear about what you're planning for 2019. That's a totally acceptable thing to do. You may also want to plan some outreach in the end of January and the beginning of February that says, hey, I'm planning on coming to Summit and Salute. Are you going to be there as well? Can we grab a coffee? Can I get a coffee on your schedule? That way you're creating your own matchmaker without having to go through the matchmaker situation. And you might need to send that email a couple of times, right? Because maybe they don't get the first one that you send. So you don't want to send it the week before Summit and Salute. You want to say it at the end of the January. If they don't reply, you want to give them a phone call. And then maybe you send a third email. Don't be annoying, but 3 things is okay over the course of 6 weeks, right? That is not annoying. That is a totally acceptable and reasonable thing to do. So think about hey, it's been a couple months since I saw you. Hey, what's going on at the end of the year? What are you planning? And then start getting prepared for Summit and Salute.
Absolutely. Someone asked if we would be sending them the recording for this. So we will be sending this out. We are recording it. One thing I wanted to add to what you said is that I've actually seen that work. I've sent multiple emails to one of the supplier diversity people, either on my behalf or on behalf of my clients, and they might not respond to that email, but when I see them, they say, I did get your email, and this is my response. That's happened to me several times. So just because they didn't take the time to say, I passed it on, doesn't mean that they're not looking at those and that it's going into a black hole. So I think that's a really good point to make.
Yeah, I also think that you need to consider other ways to develop relationships. So one of the big things for us within WeBank is that the corporate buyers are not always the best clients for us. A lot of times the other WBEs are the people that really need our help. We work mostly with middle market B2B companies. And so a lot of those are owned by women, and this community, the join forces, work together thing is really important. We also work with a lot of other WBEs as our vendors as well. And so I've met some incredible supplier diversity people. And what I've asked them for is, hey, if you're doing some education for your suppliers, would you consider us to help provide a session on social media or on marketing or on communications? And a lot of times they're like, yeah, sure, we can talk about that, or that might be interesting. And I've gotten some opportunities through that, right? So they've become my advocate, but in a very different way than, hey, give me a contract, or hey, how can I do business with your company? And so I think it's important for our community to think about opportunities and to think about relationships more than just a direct give and take, like the myth that you talked about, Liz. It really is a more circular. It's an ecosystem, right, of us supporting each other in different ways, not just, hey, give me a contract.
Right. Right. Or hey, even, support if someone is winning an award at NMSDC,
Yeah.
congratulate them on their award. It's the easiest thing to do. To do that, you probably do have to follow Twitter, at the very least LinkedIn, to know that they've won that award, but just congratulate them on the award. That's the easiest. It's a very nice way to just get back in touch and again, build that relationship. You're not making an ask there, but you're
But you're being
saying,
a human, right? Like you're being a person who cares about other people. And that's
yeah,
what it's about.
yeah, awesome.
Good. So we're right at 12:45. I think our goal was to get this wrapped up in 45 minutes. We thank everybody who's attended. Liz and I are going to talk about doing some other things like this. So if you have feedback for us, please feel free to contact either or both of us. We'll send a follow-up email with a link to the recording. And we hope everybody has an incredibly productive day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.